Hello, everyone. I hope that you're all doing well, wherever or whenever you may be watching this. The current date that I'm recording this on is the 21st of December, so there's 4 days until Christmas. And hopefully, you all didn't leave your Christmas shopping to the last minute like I did, but that's our little secret, okay? We won't tell anyone. So, today, I was planning on making a video on Avatar: The Way of Water, which I saw in the theatre recently. And the way I normally like to do these things is I like to sit down and think about a topic for a while, and then I like to write down my thoughts, and then through the process of focusing in on what I want the point to be, I'll sort of trim the excess fat from the thoughts, and so I'll be left with a script which I feel presents the ideas that I've had in a way that people can understand. And so, after I saw Avatar, I tried to do the same thing because I had a lot of thoughts about the movie. But the more that I thought about it and the more that I sat down and tried to put pen to paper, the more I found that my thoughts were conflicting with each other a lot. And the process of trying to write these thoughts down became difficult to the point where I felt that it might just be better to sit down and just start talking about it rather than organizing it beforehand. And my hope by doing it this way is that through the process of talking about the movie today in this way, I'll be able to understand my own feelings on it better, understand the more objective points about the movie, and to understand how the movie fits into the larger cultural landscape that it exists in. I don't entirely know how long this will go on for. Obviously, if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see the timestamp, so you'll know how long it goes on for. But I'm just gonna speak until I feel like I've said everything that I need to say about this. I'm not gonna constrain myself with it has to be under a certain time. I'm just gonna go and see what happens. I do have notes written on paper to try and give some sort of structure to this, some sort of order, but they may go out the window. Who knows? I don't know. I think the best way to start talking about this movie is to ignore it for a second and talk about the first one and kind of establish what my thoughts are on that, and hopefully that'll give us a solid foundation as we talk about the sequel. So, when the first one came out in 2009, I remember going to see it with everyone else. I remember being impressed with it on a technical level, on a visual level, like everyone. And I remember the story being fine, but not being truly amazed by it. And after that first viewing, I don't think I watched it again for years. I think it's one of those movies that I always just kind of put to the back of my mind. I didn't really give it much thought until very recently when I rewatched it in preparation for the new one coming out, because I figured that I hardly remember anything about the first one. I should probably catch myself up in terms of where the storyline is, where the characters are. And what I found when I rewatched it was that I actually enjoyed it a lot more than I thought that I would. And I think what contributed to my enjoyment is, one, I am a different person now than I was, 13 years ago? Is that how long ago was it? Yeah, 13 years ago. So I'm a different person, and my awareness of art and movies and fiction has changed. My knowledge has changed. My uh, background in terms of what I'm trained to do uh, has obviously given me more information since the time Avatar came out. And so watching it now allowed me to appreciate the story that was being told, and also to appreciate the fact that the story was not the story was not trying to be overly complicated. And when I was doing some research into kind of the background of Avatar, one of the things that kept coming up, which I I don't know if I just kind of assumed this because I hadn't seen it for so long, but that the story being simple was being treated as a bad thing in general. And it took me a while after watching the first Avatar this latest time, to kind of understand what the actual problem was. And I think the problem is that because the technology that was used to make the movie is so groundbreaking and so forward thinking, and because the visual effects are so amazing to look at, because the story is just okay, I feel like it underwhelms people who try to look at these things with a more critical eye. I think that's the best way to put it. That's not to say that the story is bad or that the characters are bad. It's just that when you compare it to these enormous leaps in the other aspects of the movie, the story just kind of seems average at best, and I think that is what contributes a lot to people's negative views of it. But I found myself appreciating it this time round, and I think part of the reason for that is when I was watching it, I was thinking a lot about James Cameron as a director. And one of the things that I kind of realized is that all of James Cameron's movies are kind of on the simple side with the stories. Even the ones that people kind of universally like. If you go back to his Terminator movies or Aliens or Titanic, when you break down what's actually happening in those movies, the stories are very simple. They're not these huge, complicated epics, even though they might seem that at times. Because I think the reason why people often view stories like that as bigger than they are is because the background world that surrounds these stories is so... What's the right word that I'm looking for here? It feels like these stories take place in a massive world where there's so many things going on in the background that we don't see, and that allows these simpler stories that Cameron is actually telling to feel like they're a small part of a larger whole. And I think this is true of Terminator, where you have, you've got the future war, and you've got the rise of the machines, and you've got Skynet, and you've got all this stuff in the background. But the first Terminator movie is a horror slasher love story. It's very simple, and it works. And the same thing is true with Aliens. You've got this background of like the company and the aliens and the alien life cycle and the wider world that encompasses. But the core of that story is a mother and daughter story. It's very simple stuff. Avatar fits into that mold more than I think people, I want to say, give it credit than, but that's not really the right way to describe it. What I'm trying to say is that there is very much a through line in James Cameron's movies that he follows, and I think that Avatar is just another example of that through line happening. And I don't necessarily think that the movie should be criticized for that. You can criticize the quality of the writing, because there are certainly issues. You can criticize some of the characterization, because there are certainly issues there as well. But overall, I think that the first Avatar movie succeeds in what it sets out to do, which I think is kind of James Cameron's staple as a filmmaker. He succeeds in what he sets out to do. With the first Avatar, he wanted to tell an environmental story about, colonizers and, a native tribe that is being oppressed or dominated. And he wanted to tell this story about this one guy who is with one side and then switches over to the other. It's very Pocahontas, which a lot of people criticize the movie for as well, which I always found strange, because most movies are inspired by previous works. In fact, I was thinking about this the other day when I was having a conversation with someone, and I asked them, is the first Avatar movie weaker? No, that's not what I said. What am I saying? That's not right. Let me try that again. What I said was, is it a mark against the first Avatar movie that its plot is so similar to Pocahontas or to Ferngully, The Last Rainforest? Because they're the two movies that always get brought up. And initially, the response that I got was yes, because of plagiarism or because of unoriginality. And so I thought, okay, that's fair. But then when you ask, okay, does The Lion King also get a mark against it because it's so close to Hamlet? And then when you ask that question, people get a lot more... They have a lot more doubt about their answer, because with the case of The Lion King, that is obviously a beloved movie that generations have seen. It's one of the stories that is arguably timeless, that kind of everyone will experience. And so that movie, if we follow the logic that we use for Avatar, should be criticized because it has the same very similar structure to Hamlet. But then again, Hamlet could be criticized because it's got a very similar structure to Danish mythology, and then that could be criticized because it's got a very similar structure to Egyptian mythology with the Osiris myth, and then that can be criticized because it's got a very similar structure to a previous mythology that we don't know a lot about. And you can just trace these back all the way until eventually you'll hit a point where recorded history just stops and then you can't trace them back anymore. And so I don't feel like we should criticize movies on the basis of using these, what's the right word? Not tropes. Using these mythological concepts as a foundation to build on. Because at the end of the day, the story of Avatar and Pocahontas, even though it's very similar, the worlds are different. Pocahontas is obviously set in our real world with the baggage of our real world history that goes along with it. Whereas Avatar is set in the future on this fantasy planet, and I think the comparison is unfair. Right, so what else is there to talk about Avatar? Let me have a quick look at the notes. It's the most successful movie of all time, but has no cultural impact. Yeah, so that's something else that I saw when I was looking this up, is that apparently Avatar has no cultural impact. Now, I'm not exactly certain what people mean when they say this, but it's repeated a lot. What I think they're talking about is that, and this may be wrong, maybe someone can correct me, but this is how I interpret that saying. When you make a movie that is one of, if not the most successful movie of all time, then you really should see that resonate throughout pop culture and throughout fandom. And I think the example that I kind of thought of was that it's very similar to when Star Wars came out. When the original Star Wars comes out, it's mega successful. It makes a ton of money. It's groundbreaking. It's got all these revolutionary special effects, a lot like Avatar. But Star Wars also had this kind of lasting impact on people where you would have kids and adults and men and women and all different people of different ages and different races all dressing up as Star Wars characters because the stories of those movies resonated with people to the point where even in the, I suppose what you could call the dark ages that we exist in now with Star Wars, which is a whole separate issue, but let's put that aside. But like even nowadays, there is a lot of fondness for especially the original three movies. There's even a kind of retroactive fondness for the prequel movies, and I think that people compare Avatar to that. As like Avatar has not done what Star Wars did. It has not had this massive cultural presence since the first movie came out. And this is strange because the movie made so much money. Now, when you think about the effect that Avatar has actually had, it has actually had a significant effect on the way entertainment has been made. A lot of the technologies that it pioneered have been incorporated into, the system of making movies. It's not the first movie to do fully CGI character. Obviously, there was previous efforts, but it's made it. I think Disney. Don't Disney have this thing called is it called the volume, where they shoot on. It's like a set, but it's not really a set because it's an LED background. I'm fairly certain that concept would not exist if it weren't for Avatar and its fully digital world. And then you even have movies like we were talking about The Lion King before, the remake, the quote unquote live action remake, which I have not seen and I refuse to see on principle, but that wouldn't have been possible without Avatar. So when I hear people say that the movies had no cultural impact, I think they're technically right, but I think that ignores the impact that Avatar actually has. Or has had, I should say. Now, whether or not the first movie deserved to make, 2.2 billion? Is that what it made in its initial run? It's up to 2.9 now since re-releases. I couldn't tell you if that's fair or not. I don't even know how you would begin to judge whether that was fair. Like, what movie deserves to be the highest grossing movie of all time? You ask 100 different people that question, you'll get 100 different answers. So, I don't think that the statement that Avatar is not relevant is 100% true. And I think given the box office for the first weekend of Avatar: The Way of Water, which I believe was 500 million internationally, 500 million worldwide. Clearly a lot of people were interested in seeing this. Now, whether this has the same staying power that the last movie did, we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, we'll get into talking about that soon, but there's obviously a legacy that Avatar has that I think people are kind of misjudging, and I think maybe it's just worth keeping in mind that there is a whole population out there of people that do not spend time online, who don't leave comments, who don't make YouTube videos, who don't do podcasts, and every single one of them might have very fond memories of going to see Avatar. In fact, I think that could be viewed as the cultural legacy of Avatar. It's not the merchandise or the pop culture references or the toys or the outfits. It's the fact that a lot of people have this memory of going to see a very specific experience in the movie theater and just leaving it being absolutely flawed. I think that is the legacy of Avatar, and I think that it's a legacy that is probably earned. Having watched it recently, it is a treat to watch. I don't mind long movies. I can sit and watch Star Trek the motion picture, even though everyone says that's the boring one. I kind of like it. So maybe I'm not the best person to ask about if the movie's too long, but I was entertained throughout the whole thing. I appreciated it a lot, and I think that it's a movie that will be remembered for its strengths ultimately. That may not be happening now, but I think down the line, I think it will. And I think that's all I've got to say about the first one. So, I think, finally, we're ready to move on to Avatar The Way of Water. So I need to turn the page over to get a look at my notes. So, the first thing I want to talk about with this movie, before we talk about the actual plot or the characters or the visual effects or the reception or any of that, is I want to talk about the reason behind the conflict in my mind about how to feel about this movie. Because on the one hand, this movie represents the completion of the dream that every creative person ever has had. The idea that you as an individual have complete creative control over your work. You control every little tiny aspect of it. No one will interfere with you. And on top of that, you have what is essentially a limitless budget. You can do whatever you want and someone else is paying for it and you don't have to worry about it. You ask any musician, painter, author, playwright, video game designer, you ask any one of these types of people and they will all tell you that this is the type of creative freedom that they crave. And as someone who is creative themselves in a number of different fields, I have the utmost respect for James Cameron and what he has achieved with this movie. It really is something that you don't really hear about anymore, because especially in the last, I would say, decade or so, with the popularization of the Marvel movies and kind of the producer as the overseer of, especially in movies, like how these things go. The idea of just an auteur director coming out and doing his thing and being given all the resources he needs to do it. It just doesn't happen. It's such a rare occurrence that this movie, I think, may forever hold a special place in my heart for that alone. Like that, James Cameron is living the dream. So that's the one hand. In the other hand, we have the movie itself, and this is where things start to get a little bit more complicated, because this movie has a lot of problems with it in terms of the potential subjective problems that people are going to have, but also the more objective writing character issues that you can point to. Script issues, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And so, trying to balance these two opinions is why this video was so hard to do, and why I ended up choosing to do it in this way. And I think that the movie needs to be looked at in a fairly close way, with a fairly close examination to determine the qualities that it actually has. So we're going to start with the obvious thing, which is the visuals. The visuals are obviously subjective. I personally thought they were very, very impressive. Now, whether or not someone is going to find them impressive for 3.5 hours, that is up to them. Again, probably the wrong person to ask about this. But I thought they were very well done. I was sold the entire way. I never looked at it thinking that I was looking at something fake. So I think that there's definitely there is a lot of credit to be paid to Cameron, and more importantly the people on the visual effects team, who is I believe it's Weta Workshop in New Zealand. I don't know who else worked on this, but whoever did, if you're one of the visual effects artists that worked on this, well done, well done. You have made something very impressive here, and I am very appreciative. Whether it was entirely necessary to wait 12 years for this, I'm not entirely sure, but there is a thought that I had about that actually, which is that I kind of wonder if this movie has come at the perfect time for itself. Not necessarily for its for its box office potential, but in terms of the story that's being told. I get the same vibe from this movie without going into the plot just yet, but I kind of feel the same way about this movie that I feel about Toy Story 3, in the sense that the both movies feature a time jump in the story that roughly matches the amount of time that has passed since the previous movie was in theaters. So in Toy Story's case, it was Toy Story 2, Andy is a kid, and then in Toy Story 3, he's going off to college, so that is a fairly decent chunk of time, and I think that the distance between Toy Story 2 and Toy Story 3 was 12 years, maybe, something. I don't know. I need to look that up, but it was a decent chunk of time. And the same thing with Avatar. So 10 years have passed since the last movie. Now we're here. A bunch of stuff has happened. This does pose a couple of issues, possibly, but that we can get into those later. So we're going to try and go through this slowly and just walk through. So visuals, great. Put that aside. Okay, before we go into the story, I want to briefly mention the music. So I didn't really talk about the music in the last one. There is a YouTube video out there. I forget who the person who made it was, but it's called something like Avatar has the most ironic soundtrack of all time, something like that. If I find the video, I'll link it below. That goes into kind of the background creation of the score and all that stuff. That might be worth a listen to. But generally speaking, the music for the first one was fine. I liked it. It was a Hollywood music. It was good. It was composed by James Horner, who unfortunately passed away several years ago in tragic circumstances, so he was not available to do the score for this one. The score was done by someone else, and I would say that the score is fine. It never got in the way. It also never really impressed me. Your mileage may vary. So yeah, that's all I have to say about that. So let's get into Let's get into the juicy stuff, which is the story. And we're going to try and do this slowly, step by step. I think I remember most of the stuff that happens in it, but this movie is long, and I saw it at 10 o'clock at night in a theatre that was fairly full after a full shift at work. So yeah, this is this could go very, very wrong. I have no idea. So it's been 10 years since the ending of the last movie. Jake Sully, who in the last movie fought off the humans, killed the general character, whose name is Quarterich, I think. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And he successfully moves from his human body into his avatar body to be a Na'vi full-time. Bunch of people died. I think Sigourney Weaver's character died. That is important to remember. In the last movie, Sigourney Weaver's human character died, and they tried to transfer her consciousness from her dying human body into her avatar body. It did not work. That is important. So 10 years on, Jake is married to Neytiri, who is the female Na'vi who was his mentor in the previous movie. They have children together. They have 2 boys, a young girl, and an adopted daughter who is the... Hang on, I did write this down. So the adopted daughter, whose name is Kira, is the daughter of Sigourney Weaver's character from the last movie, her avatar. Yeah, that's right. So, Sigourney Weaver's avatar character, it's her daughter, even though the avatar wasn't pregnant, and the consciousness of Sigourney Weaver's human character did not go into the avatar character, and Kira is a daughter who just seemed to come out of nowhere. And it's a big mystery, and even the characters are like, it's a big mystery, we don't know what's going on. Kira, the daughter, is also played by Sigourney Weaver. That was a choice that was made. Just reference, Kira is the only one of the children's names that I can remember. I don't remember the name of the 2 brothers. I probably should have looked that up. And the same with the daughter, but it doesn't matter. I don't think anyone remembers, if I'm being honest. So, he has this family, and he is the chief of the Na'vi tribe. The Omatikai? I can't remember what their names are. So, he's the chief of the tribe, and they've been living in relative peace for the past 10 years. All of a sudden, there is a new star that appears in the sky, which signifies that the humans are coming back. And this gets into the first problem that I have with this. So, in the last movie, the reason why the humans were on Pandora in the first place was that they were after something called unobtainium, which is an incredibly silly name, to the point where I actually really respect James Cameron for just calling it unobtainium. Why not? Why not? Who cares? Why not? It's just a thing. So, that was the big thing. Everything about the first movie is getting as much of this unobtainium as they can from the planet. The problem was that the biggest deposit of unobtainium on the planet was underneath this big tree where all the Na'vi lived, and so the humans are going to have to bulldoze it down. So, they fought off, now they're coming back. Why are they coming back? Well, apparently, it's not for the unobtainium. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think unobtainium is actually mentioned in this movie at all. Or it might be mentioned very briefly. But the humans that are coming to Pandora now are not after that. They're after they're basically trying to just colonize the planet now. They're not really interested in the specific resources. They're just going to colonize the planet to make it a new home, because Earth is a mess. We're told, we don't see it. Earth is a disaster. We're going to bring the humans here. We're going to start a new life. Point number 1. Why are you trying to colonize a planet where you cannot breathe the air? So that's okay, that's a bit strange. Number 2, why are you trying to colonize a planet which has a native population that is openly hostile to you? The human beings have space travel. They could go anywhere in the universe. Are you telling me that this sole planet is the one place that they can colonize? It's just that doesn't seem like a big issue, and it's not, because it just sets the stage. But the problem that this movie has, which the last movie also kind of had, but not to as much an extent, is that the humans are stupid, and they are comically evil. And I'm talking Dick Dastardly and his sidekick Muttley. We are talking Saturday matinee villain types here. We're not talking about any deep, complex reasoning, okay? We are talking Saturday morning cartoon, right? They come and they're just gonna wipe everything out and they're gonna make their home. Okay, so we'll let that go. Fine. Part of the human strike force are what are called recombinants. And what these recombinants are is avatar bodies created using the DNA of the military people from the last movie and the digitized memories of those characters that were sent back to Earth before the final battle in the last movie. I think that's how it works, yeah. So, the main antagonist of this movie is again the Colonel, played by I believe his name is Stephen Lang, is the actor's name, who plays Quaritch, but now he's an avatar version who has the digitized memories of his previous self from before his death. Now that's important because he doesn't know how he died. The recording that is left for him by his original human self is made before the attack. So all that the recombinant has to go on is that his human self said, if you're seeing this, I'm probably dead, and if I am, Jake Sully's probably the one who did it. Okay. So he set it up. It's basic revenge stuff now. He's going to be out to find Jake, kill him, and anyone else that might be in the immediate vicinity. So, excuse me, I'll just take a small drink. That's better. So, Jake and his tribe and his family, in order to counter the humans, have been engaging in a guerrilla warfare. And this seems to be going well because Jake is a military man. He knows what he's doing. However, there are problems specifically with the family unit. So I forget what the brothers' name are. I should look this up. This is very unprofessional of me. Avatar: The Way of Water. Please give me a character. So, the Neteyam and Loak. Oh, this is going to be a disaster. Maybe this was a mistake. I should not have looked this up. Okay, so Jake's kids. The firstborn is called Neteyam. The second is Loak, and the third is Tuk, who is the third is the young daughter. Then there's obviously Kira, who is the... Oh, is it Kira or Kiri? I should have looked that up too. My God, I am so unprofessional. It is Kiri. God damn it. Okay, Kiri is the Sigourney Weaver character. There's also another character called Spider, who we will be talking about much later, who is a human being who is living on Pandora, who was a child during the events of the last movie, and so as a result, when the human beings were fought back from Pandora, Spider was too young to go into cryostasis, so he stayed behind, and Jake raised him as a son. This is something that Neytiri does not like. So, I think now we're caught up. So, his two sons, Jake's two sons, Neteyam and Loak. The older one is far more responsible, far more careful, far more well-trained. The younger one, a little bit more rash, a little bit more unpredictable. They are given a task, at the start of the movie, one of the things that we see Jake doing is he's leading a team of Na'vi against a train, and this train is carrying supplies that the Na'vi are going to steal to help with their fight against the humans. He tells his two sons to act as lookout. His two sons do not obey this order. They come down to the train with them after the fight is done, to find weapons and stuff like that. And as a result, a human vertebrate helicopter thing is able to sneak up on the party and do some damage and kill some Na'vi. And Jake, quite rightly, scolds his sons for this. This was a huge mistake, and I think he says something in the movie along the lines of, "I gave you this responsibility, and you were not able to do it. Like, how can I trust you? You know, you're meant to listen to orders." Fair point. Now, this single mistake might seem irrelevant in terms of the overarching story of the movie, because it might seem like it's leading towards an arc. And it kind of does, but it's probably the biggest problem in the movie on a character level. And this first one is not so bad, but I'm just mentioning it. Ugh, let me try that again. I'm mentioning it because I need to try and keep track of how many times the younger brother, Loic, screws up. So this is one. This is the first time. So, the day is over. The fight's been won. They return home. After being told off by his father, Loic decides that he's going to disobey him again and take his older brother, his younger sister, and his adopted sister to the... I forget what they call it. I think they call it the camp, but it's essentially the small trailer at the end of the last movie where Jake's body was when he was piloting his avatar during the battle. So they go there. While they're there, the recumbents arrive and take them captive. Now, this is obviously a massive screw up by the younger brother, and in this case, not only has he endangered himself and his brother, but he's endangered every single one of his siblings. Oh, Spider's with them as well. I forgot about that. Yeah, Spider. Oh my god, I think I might be trying to deliberately forget about Spider. That's not good. Okay, so let's keep going. The recumbents find them, and this is where a big fight ensues, and Jake and Neytiri learn about Quaritch, the general, being revived somehow. At this point, Quaritch also learns about how his human self died. He learns that it wasn't Jake that killed him, but it was Neytiri. Yeah, so that's that. So, in this process, Jake goes to save his kids. He does save all of them except Spider. Spider is captured by the recumbents. And this causes a big concern, because Jake now has a problem. The problem is Spider knows about a lot of the tactical situations that the Na'vi have found themselves in. He knows about their hideouts, their attack patterns, all the typical military stuff. And so the fact that he's been captured by the enemy means that Jake, his family, and his tribe are at risk. So, Jake has a decision to make. And the decision that he chooses is that he's going to renounce his position as leader of the tribe. He's going to take his family, and they're going to travel as far away as they can, and they're basically going to hide from Quaritch. This is an incredibly baffling thing to happen, and while I was watching the movie, I was just amazed because okay, there are a number of problems. The first problem is, even if Jake and his family leave, Okay, no, hang on. Getting ahead of myself. Number one, would Jake, a soldier, run? Okay, now there is a argument for and against this. The argument for is that, well, he's thinking about his family. He just wants to keep them safe. He's a father. He's a very protective father. He wants to protect everyone. So that's true. On the other hand, he's a soldier. He's a fighter. He knows, he is easily the most valuable person in this conflict that the Na'vi have. So him leaving is a serious disadvantage of them. He should know that. So that you can kind of see the conflict there. Okay, that's fine. But the other problem is, even if Jake leaves, how does he know that they aren't just going to attack the rest of the Na'vi people? What makes him think that Quaritch is not just going to steam into the mountains where they are and just wipe them all out? Like, the movie never addresses this. In fact, the other Na'vi, I don't think are even seen again. Like, the Forest Tribe, not seen again through the entire movie. Like, when Jake decides to leave, they are just almost forgotten about. So that's baffling. The other thing that's baffling, aside from leaving the people, is in the first movie, they make a big deal over two specific locations. The two locations are, I forget what they call it. I think they call it Home Tree, which is the big massive tree that is on top of the deposit of unobtainium where the Na'vi live. That's one, which is destroyed, and the other is called the Tree of Souls, I believe. Now, the Tree of Souls is not destroyed at the end of the last movie, and it's established that the Tree of Souls is an incredibly holy place, I suppose is the best way to describe it. It's a place that the Na'vi view as very sacred. It's a place where their goddess? I don't quite know what the correct way to describe this, but Eywa, the spirit that they believe inhabits everything. It's the place where the essence of that thing is strongest. So it's a very, very sacred site to them. And Jake knows this because he himself is connected to it. He connected to it in the last movie when he prayed to Eywa. And they just abandon it. They just leave. They just disappear. And I think the tree is shown once in the movie and then never addressed again. And you would think that, considering like you make such a big deal about how precious the environment is to the Na'vi and how precious their spirituality is and how everything is connected. And the first movie makes this whole thing about how the way that the fauna works on Pandora is almost like a brain system. Like, everything's connected. There's just neurons firing everywhere. And so Jake decides he's going to just leave this tree. And to be fair, he's not the only stupid one here, because the enemy combatants also don't go after this tree. Like, it seems like so obvious to anyone if you even remotely paid attention to the first one. Like, that tree is important to both sides of this conflict. It's important to the Na'vi to defend it, and it's important to the humans to attack it. Not addressed in this movie at all. They do bring in a new tree, kind of. Not really. Later, but it's not the same tree. It's a completely different tree. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to say that James Cameron just forgot about the tree and how important it was. I think, I don't really want to speculate, but if I was to speculate, I would say that James Cameron was so in love with the idea of going to the water and doing this underwater and all that entails, that he just kind of let the tree slip to the wayside. And we will talk a little bit later about how this is the most James Cameron movie that James Cameron has ever made. Hopefully this is not as long as the actual movie itself, so we will get to it within the next couple of minutes, but I don't know what's going to happen. So, Jake and his crew flee. Spider is kidnapped. Jake decides to flee to the water people. And the water people are another tribe that exists a certain distance away. I'm not entirely sure how much from the previous tribe, but they live a certain distance away. So Jake goes there to hide. He and the chief meet, and they obviously have a respect for each other. Neytiri and the chief's wife meet, and they clearly do not like each other, which I any guy that's been in a relationship understands that dynamic. So that's all I'm gonna say. I'm not gonna say any more. So Jake has resolved to hide. Fair enough. And in order to hide successfully, him and his family both have to learn, as they say, they have to learn the way of the water. They have to adapt to this tribe and its customs and its rituals and its way of life. So it's a very similar concept to the first movie when Jake was ingratiating himself to the Na'vi, the forest Na'vi, who live in the trees and have a certain way of living. He had to learn that. Now he has to do the same again, except this time it's his whole family. Spider, on the other hand, is taken by the humans and he's tortured for information on the whereabouts of the tribe, which he does not give up. And we find out at some point that Spider is the son of Quaritch, the general. Now, having rewatched the previous movie just before watching this new one, I can say with confidence that a son is never mentioned. I don't quite know why Spider exists. I can't really say much more than that without getting into the nitty gritty of Spider's character, and I don't want to do that just yet. I'm really trying to hold off on talking about Spider. So, Quaritch decides that in order to get information out of Spider, it would be best to ingratiate himself to the kid. And they do. They start talking. They start getting a bond. So, that's the first third of the movie. And already there are cracks. There are problems. It looks amazing. It sounds amazing. But the story is already showing holes that are only going to get bigger as the movie progresses. Hole number one is Spider. Again, we'll talk about it later. Hole number two is the younger brother, Loic, who the decisions that he makes throughout this movie are baffling to me. And then the response that the people around him have is also baffling. So you've already got these two major issues. And then we move into the second act. And this is where it's primarily focused. The best way that I can describe it is that the plot kind of stops and we focus on the characters, specifically Jake's kids. The movie becomes essentially their movie for the next hour. So the movie follows Jake and his kids trying to fit in, trying to learn the way of water, and not being successful at it first, but then slowly growing into it, all with the exception of Sigourney Weaver's character, Kiri, who takes to this very, very well, to the point where it's ungodly how well she takes to this. So they're trying to learn, they're trying to fit in. They encounter what can only be described as high school bullies, in the form of the chief's son. And they also find what will inevitably become the crush of the two brothers, which is the chief of the water tribe's daughter. So they're going through and they're learning about the way of water, and the problems really start to amount here in terms of the decision making of the younger brother. So he regularly causes fights. There is one sequence of events which is bizarre to me. So let me try and slow this down and go through it step by step. First thing that happens is the sister, I think it's Kiri, is getting made fun of by the Water Chief's son, the bully. The two brothers, Netium and Loic, go to defend her. A fight breaks out, and eventually it's separated. Now, this is fine so far. What happens next is Jake scolds Loic to his face, tells him to go to the chief's son and to make it right no matter what. After Loic leaves, Jake turns to the older son, Netium, and asks, what happened, asks him how the other guy looks. The son says they look worse than we do, to which Jake is like, good, great, as in, well done, you held your own. And I'm like, why didn't you say that to Loic? Why did you only say that to one son? Like, I don't understand the point of that. That was strange. Like, even watching it, like, a lot of these things that you find about the movie being problematic, I suppose is the best way to describe it, you only think of after the fact, like after you're thinking back on it. But that was a moment where I was in the movie and I was just taken straight out because it's just so obvious. Like, do not say that to one son and then not say it to the other. So that happens. Loic goes to the chief's son, apologizes. The chief's son then says, oh, why don't you come out with us and we'll go hunting? It's beyond the reef. Now, this is an incredibly stupid thing for Loic to do, but he agrees. And so they go out, but it's a trick. They're leaving him there. And the movie never addresses this, but the spot that the bullies are leading Loic to is this place where there's an incredibly dangerous predator. And it's like, they clearly tried to kill him, and the movie never addresses this. Like, there's not one sentence where it's like, oh my god, like the chief is just kind of like, oh, it was bad, wasn't it? Like, you shouldn't have done this because he got lost. I'm like, it doesn't matter if he got lost. You tried to kill him. Why am I the only one that seems to notice this? Like, oh my god, it was frustrating. So that's three. Okay, that's three mistakes that the brother has made. We're not even finished. Okay, that's just three of them, and it's just an ongoing problem that the son, he keeps making these decisions that clearly go against common sense and logic, and you just wonder why. Like, why are you doing this? Now, I'm going to take a break from talking about the story for a second, and I want to talk a little bit about pacing, because this movie has been criticized for being too long, and it's also been criticized for the best way that I can describe it is it's been criticized for sagging in the middle, right? Like, the first third is fine, the last third is fine, they move at a fairly decent pace, but the middle third really drags. And this is more on the subjective side. This didn't really bother me, personally. I can understand why it would bother other people, but it's kind of hard to describe. So the problem here is clearly that people have an issue with the pacing of the middle third, but pacing is a really hard thing to define in terms of what it actually is and what qualifies as good pacing. So I think it's just important to know going into it that the middle third, the best way that I can describe it is that the actual plot events slow down and you focus on the characters, for better or worse. Whether you like that is going to be up to you, but I just thought that I would mention it. It is something that a lot of people are talking about, and I think I did see one or two reviews where they say that this part was boring. Again, that's really subjective, so I can't really say anything about it. It's not that stuff is not happening, it's just happening at a much slower pace and on a much smaller scale than the first third of the movie, is the best way I can describe it. So, what else have we got here? So, at this point in the movie, we're introduced to the whales. Now, when Loic is out there by himself and he gets attacked by this giant sea monster, he's saved by this giant whale. Now, they don't call it a whale, but it's a whale. And there's this whole thing about, he bonds with the whale, and, the whale saves him, and he forms this connection. Just like in the first movie, there's a lot of themes in this about connecting with nature and animals and stuff like that. So that's fine, that's what. Again, people have criticized the movies for being environmental in their messaging, like pro-environmentalism. I don't necessarily view that as a problem because that's what James Cameron wants to do with these movies. The question is it executed in a way which is of good quality? The actual message is the message. You'll either agree with it or you won't. I think the only problem that I think may have some legitimacy is that he's preaching about an environmental issue in this movie, which does not seem entirely relevant at the moment. Not that that's an issue, it's just I think that's what people are. I think that's the point that people are getting at when they say, oh, the message is not working. It's because, people don't view whaling as a problem. And there are obviously, that's a whole separate issue. Like, you can, if you want to spend 3 hours not watching Avatar and doing research, then look into the whole history of whaling and anti-whaling laws and all stuff like that. There's a lot there. It's too much to go into now, but that's the point of the movie. It's all about the environment and especially about saving whales, to the point where one of the sequences, I'm jumping around a little bit here, but one of the sequences in the movie is an extended sequence of how the human beings are killing these whales, and it is very intense is the best way to describe it. They linger on the pain that the creature is feeling. It goes back to what I was saying about the humans being comically evil. It's like they don't just kill these creatures, they find the most barbaric way to kill them. It's like they can't just, skewer them like a kebab. They've got to, first they've got to shoot their fins with these balloons that inflate them, and then they've got to first they've got to tag them, then they've got to shoot these balloons to inflate them, then they've got to spin them around, and then they've got to shoot a harpoon that goes underneath the water and then arches up and then hits them in the thing. It's a whole thing. It's like ridiculous. It's like, okay, I get what the point is, because you've slapped me in the face with it. It's like, I understand, okay? Drink break. So, the kid, Loic, I hope that's the right pronunciation. He comes back to the tribe. They have this big apology. The bully kid who tried to kill him, nothing bad happens to him. He's like, oh, you know what? Oh, Loic decides not to rat him out, and so the bully kid's like, hey, why didn't you not rat me out? And Loic's like, actually, I don't even think Loic gives a good answer, so it's whatever. And then they're like, oh, well, we should be friends. It'd be great, wouldn't it? What? No. Anyway, we learn more about these whales, about how the water people really love these whales, like, really love these whales, but also that these whales are, like, hyper intelligent, like, to the point where I think they mention in the movie that they're smarter than humans are, to the point where they have their own culture, they have their own language, they have their own art, they have their own music. Like, one of them is described as a composer of songs. Now, I don't quite know how a whale composes songs. Like, how do you write them down so that people know how to play them? But that's a separate issue. It's fine, doesn't matter. So these whales are all of a sudden very important, and we spend a little bit of time learning about the history of them and about how there's this one whale, which is the whale that Loic found, who is an outcast because the whales swore off violence and all this stuff. What else happens? After that, there is a scene. Hang on, let me check the notes. Kiri. Oh yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. So the new Tree of Souls thing. So underwater, there is this what is essentially the Tree of Souls 2, and Kiri, who's the Sigourney Weaver character, she goes down and she connects to it. And when she connects to it, she sees an image of her mother. But this is not explained super well. Her actual mother is Sigourney Weaver's Avatar character from the previous movie. But the woman that she sees in her vision is the human version of Sigourney Weaver's character. And they hug each other. And then Kiri asks, "Who is my father?" And then she has a seizure. She's carted away. And then, well, excuse me. She's carted away, and then Jake, obviously in panic mode, gets the human scientist from the last movie, whose name I can't remember, but he's played by the guy in Dodgeball. And they try and save her, but they can't. And eventually the chief's wife comes in and saves her, because it's like voodoo magic or something, and everything's fine. But then they learn that Kiri can't connect to the great nature thing ever again, otherwise she might have another seizure. So, the part that I didn't mention before is that Kiri is basically Jesus, in the sense that she was born through immaculate conception. So, Grace's avatar is dead, or not dead, it's hard to say, but there's no father, and Kiri just kind of exists. Now, the way it's presented in the movie, there are a couple of options as to what this could be, and I'm just going to spend a second going through some of them. Option 1 is that Kiri is somehow Sigourney Weaver's character from the first movie reincarnated in some way. They say in the first movie that when they try and take Sigourney Weaver's human character, her soul, and put it in the Avatar character, they fail, but that the soul is now with Eywa. So it's entirely possible that actually the soul ended up back in the Avatar character, just not in the way that they intended. That's possible. That's possibility number 1. Possibility number 2 is that Kiri is some sort of incarnation of Eywa itself, like the actual energy of this world. I think that they do hint very strongly that she has a deeper connection with Eywa than has been revealed. She talks at some point in the movie about how she can hear Eywa, like not just this faint idea of, oh, there's a sign, or we've seen, if we read these leaves a certain way, this is Eywa telling us something. No. Kiri says, I can hear her. I hear what she's like, this booming voice, this presence. And if I had to tell you what was going on there, I would say that it's a very kind of, it's the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost, right? So it's like Eywa is the God, and God, it's the biblical story, right? So God sends his Son down to earth, who is Jesus Christ, but Jesus Christ is also a facet of God, because God has 3 facets, like Jesus is God and God is also Jesus. And I think they're doing the same thing here. And you do see like Kiri has this connection with nature that is way beyond anything that any of the other characters have. Also, don't know if this was intentional, but the term avatar, I believe, originates from a divine sense. So when you see an avatar of something, it is normally an avatar of God. So when a god appears to you, you're not seeing God itself, because that is too powerful and it would break your mind. You're seeing an avatar of that entity. So it's entirely possible that Kiri is Eywa's avatar, and that will play into the overarching theme in Avatar 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and however many James Cameron wants to make. I do kind of like this idea. It was very interesting to me as someone that is into mythology and kind of these sort of ancient stories about like creation of the universe and stuff like that. The only problem is it's never brought up again in this movie. It's just kind of abandoned, so I have no idea what to make of it. The options that I've just discussed with you are what I have gathered after watching the movie, but the movie itself does not elaborate on this. It's sequel bait. It's the thing that the Marvel movies get criticized for. It's like, oh, well, if you watch the next one, all of this is going to make sense, and it'll be great, and it'll be groovy. Okay, so, I had to mention that quickly. Where are we now? Right, so the ending. So we do that, we move into the final act. And the final act is going to be Quarterich he's finally found out where Jake is. He's going to go to those islands. He's going to kill everyone. He's going to flush him out. And this is a great plan. Jake, for some reason, did not see this coming. I don't know. Great military tactician he is. So Quarterich comes and they start killing everyone. Jake tries to convince the Water Tribe to send the whales away. That's what they do. The Quarterich and the humans, in an attempt to lure Jake out, they decide that they're just going to start killing the whales. And the reason why the humans are hunting the whales in the first place is because inside their brains there's like this juice. And this brain juice is apparently the most valuable substance on Pandora. Well, it's the most valuable substance on Pandora until Avatar 3 comes out, and then there'll be a new valuable substance. But for this movie, it is apparently a small can of Coke is worth $80 million, it says, and apparently it can stop aging. I don't even know what to say to that. It stops aging. That's what it does. So, instead of... Oh my god, I forgot about this. I didn't write this down, but I should have remembered. Like, when they kill the whale, they drain the brain, and then they just throw the rest of the body away. And it's like... wouldn't it make more sense for these comically evil... Or, I don't know, maybe it is. Like, oh, it's so comically evil that they only want one thing, and then they throw the rest of this valuable creature away. But I don't know, it struck me as strange. Anyway, they decide that they're going to start killing these whales just for the sake of killing them. So they do. And this has caused conflict in the Water Tribe. And Jake is trying to tell them, look, you've got to send the whales away, otherwise they're going to kill them all. And the Water Tribe is like, no, we're going to go out, we're going to kill the humans first, we're going to absolutely destroy them. And Jake's like, you can't, I know what they're like, yada, yada, yada. So, eventually, they are forced into the conflict because Loak, again, disobeying orders, goes out to see his whale friend who saved him before, and finds out that the whale friend has got a tracker on him, and the human beings and Quarterich and the other recumbents are coming for him. They arrive, Jake's kids get captured, big final fight ensues. The ending of this movie has a lot of... Okay, so here's where we get to it, right? So, I said before that this movie is the most James Cameron movie that James Cameron has ever James Cameroned. And it's because this movie is all of his tropes, all of his excesses, all of his likes thrown into it with no restraint. We've got the love of the ocean. We've got the simple plot. We've got... Like, the ending of this movie is, like, almost exactly the same as Titanic. Like, they're trapped on a sinking ship. We haven't got there yet. But again, if you've been watching the video, you would have seen the title card at the start that said spoilers. So it's your fault if you've been spoiled at this point. At the ending, they're in a big sinking ship, right? And it's just so indulgent on his part. I don't necessarily think that it's a bad thing that it's that indulgent, but I think this has contributed to a lot of people feeling that the movie is just bloated. And again, bloated is not really a good phrase to describe a movie because it doesn't really mean anything, but I think what they mean is it's stuffed with so much stuff with such an excessive runtime that people are just kind of not being able to take anything on board. So we get to the final fight, and Quarterich has got Jake's kids. He's also got Spider with him. Again, we'll talk about Spider in a minute. There's a big fight that ensues. Jake's son, his oldest son, is killed. Now, this is a massive problem because, like, the son is killed due to the decisions of the younger brother. Again, like, Loic disobeys orders, disobeys instructions from his father, does his own thing, and every time he does it, he puts his family in danger, and yet he does it again. And this is the point where, like, this is the point where we would say this is where the character who has made several mistakes finally has to pay for those mistakes, right? This is the consequence that he faces. His older brother is killed. It's this huge tragedy. The parents are really broken up about it. Jake and Neytiri are like, right, we're not going to put up with this anymore. We're going to go and attack. So they attack. He tells Loic specifically, do not follow me. Stay where you are. Keep your sisters safe. So they go, and there's a big old fight. Loic again disobeys orders to follow. I don't even know what to say at this point, but he disobeys orders to follow, as do the two sisters. So everyone's in danger again. Big fight ensues, and at this point in the movie, Jake and Quarterich finally meet. They have a big old fight. Jake thinks he wins. Quarterich is suffocated underwater by Jake somehow. Sinks to the bottom. Jake is saved by his son, who... See, this is where I don't fully understand what's going on here, because in a normal... The way you would normally view a character arc like this is that the son makes mistakes, he pays for it, and then he has to learn from his mistakes. But what's happened here is he's made a bunch of mistakes, he's now paid for it, but instead of learning from it, he's done the exact same thing again, but this time it just happens to be the right thing to do. So I'm like, I don't fully know what I'm supposed to get from this. It's like, what exactly is the lesson he's going to learn from this? It's like, well, sometimes I do, well, all the time I disobey my father, and sometimes it nearly gets us killed, and sometimes it actually gets us killed, and then sometimes, like, 1 in every 10 times, something good will happen. Like, is that the point? I don't know. But he saves his dad, the two sisters save the mum, and then Spider saves Quarterich. And this is the part where we got to talk about Spider, because Spider is such a baffling creation to me that I don't even know where to start. So, he's Quarterich's son who was left behind on Pandora because he was too young to go into cryo sleep to get back to Earth. He's raised by the Na'vi. He basically views himself as one of the natives. So, when it comes time for him to be captured, clearly what the movie's going to be setting up here, and which is what does happen, is that Quarterich, as his father, or as kind of like this human element, starts to win Spider over to his side. You know, he's all of a sudden Spider has this conflict about, well, maybe humans aren't so bad, and they'll save me from torture and this and that and stuff like that. But then Spider goes back and forth about kind of where he is in terms of where his allegiances lie, which makes sense, but the shifts back and forth are so sudden. Like, he was tortured himself, and then he said, he's told that, oh, we're gonna let you go and we're gonna try and find your family and stuff like that. Like, he must know what they're going to do to the family, if to Jake's family, if they're found. Like, surely he must do. And yet, when Jake's biological sons are captured, and the threat of torture is there, Spider's like, no, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? No, stop. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, did you not know this was going to happen? And then immediately after that, he's like all pally with them again. He's like, oh, I'll teach you some of the Na'vi language. I'll teach you how to ride one of those dragon things. It doesn't make any sense. So he goes back and forth, back and forth. Then at the end of the movie, you think, okay, he's finally decided he's one of the natives. But then, as he's swimming away, he sees Quarterich's body in the bottom of the ocean. He's gonna die, and Spider chooses to save him. Okay, fair enough. Spider saves him, drags him on. You think, okay, this is gonna be the start of, okay, Spider's like, I'm not one of them. Oh my god, I forgot to mention, this is important. So, Quarterich has Kiri held hostage, and Jake is powerless. He just has to watch. And then Neytiri, who has arguably the best action scene in the movie when she just goes feral, it's great. She sneaks up, gets Spider, holds him at knife point, and takes him in front of Quarterich. Is like, let the daughter go, or I will kill this kid. Son for a son, that type of thing. And as an audience member, I was watching it. I was like, I actually don't know if she will kill this kid or not, because it's established in the start of the movie that she does not like the kid. He's demon blood, he's a human, yada yada yada. And also, her son has just been murdered by this guy, and she might do it. She might kill him. And then she doesn't. And so at that point, you're thinking, okay, Spider has seen this, and he must be thinking to himself, I can't go back with these people. That crazy bitch tried to kill me. So he saves his dad. They pull him ashore. His dad gets up, is like, oh, you saved me, thank you, whatever. He gets on the big dragon, getting ready to ride away. He said, come with me, Spider. I'll take you away. We'll do things together. And then Spider just, like, growls at him and jumps in the water. I'm like, why did you save him then? Like, what? I really don't understand this decision. I don't understand why it's been made. I am just so confused by this. Spider is by far the most... Spider is the part of this movie that makes the least sense, which is amazing when you consider the fact that I've just spent the last... How long have I spent talking about this? I've just spent at least the last hour talking about this movie and all the things in it that don't make sense, and yet Spider somehow takes the cake. He is by far the most unintelligible, unreasonable... Like, I don't even know how something like this happens. Like, how you make a character that is just so inconsistent that it doesn't make any sense. It's okay, we're almost at the end. So, Jake has rescued his family, including Spider. They have a funeral for the oldest. Then Jake says, he says to the chief of the water tribe, I'm going to leave. The water tribe guy says, no, you're one of us now, you stay. And Jake's like, okay. Again, I'm thinking, what about that tree of souls over there? What about your other people? You're just going to forget about them? Okay, fine, whatever, it doesn't matter. And then the movie ends. Wow. Now, I don't even know how to conclude that, because there's just, again, the conflict that I have here is that there are so many problems with this movie, and yet I admire the fact that it even exists. You know, like this is not a Star Wars: The Last Jedi case where, you know, they took this property which is already established. You know, it has a creator, it has a set of worlds, a set of rules, and then these new guys just come in, break all the rules, break all the understanding of the universe, change all the characters. You know, it's poorly written, and it's like, that is a problem, because it's like, this is not the thing that you made, so you should not do this. But because Avatar is James Cameron's creation, I kind of do still have this thing of like, well, he can do whatever he wants. It's his world. You know, these are his characters. It's his idea. It doesn't really matter if I like it. It doesn't really matter if anyone likes it, because it's what James Cameron wanted to do. You know, as the director who has this, again, living the dream of any creator, to have unlimited finance to do whatever you want to do. And so, honestly, I still don't even really know what I think. I kind of, even though it's got all the problems, I still enjoyed it. But I think my enjoyment of it comes from this respect for James Cameron and the fact that he just did what he wanted to do. And I think that it's going to be interesting in the coming weeks seeing how well this movie performs with a general audience. Because if we take the sort of traditional line that, you know, general audiences, they only care if it looks good and it's, you know, doesn't really need to have much depth, it doesn't really need to be well written, then you could easily see this movie being successful. But at what point is the suspension gonna snap for general audiences? At what point are they gonna look at this and be, this is just too much, like, it's too excessive, it's too complicated, a lot of it doesn't make sense? I don't know what that point is. I don't even really know if doing this helped me clarify my thoughts. I think it made me not like it a little bit, but at the same time, I think that's the best way that I can describe it, is like, I enjoyed it enough that I would watch it again, despite its problems. The problems are severe, but I'm able to forgive them just because of the nature of this movie as James Cameron's movie. I think that's how I feel about it. That took me 1.5 hours to figure out. Well, that was fun. Do I have any other notes? Whales are useless. No, that's about it. So, I would be very curious to know what other people think of this movie. Oh, first off, if you made it this far into this insane ramble of mine, thank you very much. Thank you very much for staying with me. This has been fun, this, hasn't it? It's been cathartic. It's been like a therapy session. So, leave a comment if you have strong feelings either way. I'm very interested to see how this movie plays with other people. In terms of my personal circle of people that I know, I'm the only person that's seen it so far, so I haven't had a chance to speak to anyone else. I'm very interested to see what they say, and I'm very interested to see what anyone else says. So if you'd like to leave a comment telling me if you liked the movie, if you didn't like the movie, if you think it has its problems, maybe you think that the things that I brought up aren't problems, and you know, maybe you disagree with that, I'd love to read why. I'd love to hear an explanation for that. But yeah, basically anything you want to say about it, I'll read as many as need be until I finally escape from the nightmare world that is an all CGI water planet. So yeah, thank you for watching. I don't know what the next video will be, but I will see you then, and I hope you all have a lovely day. Take care.